Hello friends, enjoy this relaxing moment with Valentino's stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments section, and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. Sirens screamed through the late afternoon air, echoing off the concrete buildings that lined the narrow street. Stone's heart pounded in his chest as he hobbled forward, each breath a sharp stab of pain. He clutched the heavy bag of cash against his side, the weight pulling at his shoulders and threatening to throw him off balance. His right leg throbbed where a bullet had ripped through muscle and bone. Every step was agony, but Stone forced himself onward. He could not stop now. The streets were filled with ordinary people rushing home from work or stopping at small stalls for a quick snack. None of them knew what had just happened inside the bank. None of them saw how greed and fear had mixed into a desperate gamble. Stone moved past them so fast they might as well have been statues. A child playing with a balloon looked up in surprise as he passed. Stone glared at her, realizing too late that his eyes shone with panic and guilt. Behind him, the sound of boots on pavement grew louder. The police had spread out in a wide line, shouting orders and waving weapons. Stone heard one officer shout, "Get to the ground!" But the yell came from so far away it might as well have been in a dream. He kept limping forward, his mind racing. He thought of the bank manager's terrified face, the vault door swinging open, the hush of the borrowed silence before everything exploded. His plan had been simple in his head. He and his two partners would walk in dressed like everyday workers, masks concealing their faces. No alarms would go off until they were safe in the getaway car. 10 minutes later, money in hand, they would drive off into the city traffic. But somewhere along the line, someone had betrayed them. Stone didn't know who, and he didn't care. He had one job: get away. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a parked van. A driver jumped out, cursing, and Stone backed away, nearly dropping the bag. Sweat ran down his temples, mixing with the sting of blood on his shirt. He ripped the cloth of his sleeve and pressed it against his leg, hoping to slow the bleeding. But the pain only grew sharper, and the world tilted. Up ahead, beyond a row of plastic chairs and faded umbrellas shading outdoor markets, a chain-link fence marked the edge of an empty lot. Stone's eyes fixed on it. If he could clear the fence, he would be out of the street, out of sight. The bushes on the other side would hide him, give him just enough cover to catch his breath. He set down the bag for a single moment, cradling his pistol in one hand and reaching for the fence with the other. He pushed himself up the fence, first one boot on the bottom wire, then the other. His injured leg trembled at the strain. The bag of cash thudded against the metal. He paused, breathing hard, listening for footsteps. Sirens had fallen silent, swallowed by the city noise, but he knew the officers were closing in. Ignoring the burning in his calf, Stone bent his fingers around the top of the fence. He planted his good foot on a higher link and pushed with all his strength. The bag slipped from his shoulder and fell to the ground with a muted thump. He cursed under his breath. He could not climb without first securing that bag. He had come too far to leave it behind. He stooped, gripping the bag strap. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He heaved it upward and tossed it over the fence. For a moment, it sailed through the air and landed with a heavy crash in the overgrown grass beyond. He turned back to the fence, ready to follow. That is when the police burst into view. 3 officers sprinted toward him, guns drawn, faces set in grim lines. A tall man in a dark uniform shouted, "Freeze! Drop your weapon and get on the ground." Stone's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the gun in his hand and then at the faces around him. One of the officers was almost within arm's reach. His mind raced. He weighed his options in a fraction of a second. Fight. He could try to fire, but his aim would be poor with a shaking hand. Run. His leg would fail him before he got more than a few steps. Surrender. He would lose everything, lose his freedom, and possibly his life. Yet he knew deep inside that running now would only end in more pain. Stone's vision blurred. Memories of childhood whispers, "Stay safe, don't take what isn't yours," pressed in on him. He remembered his sister's laugh, the smell of home cooking, the small joys that had felt so far away. He realized how close he had come to destroying all of it. With a ragged exhale, Stone dropped the gun. It clattered against the metal fence and fell to the sidewalk. His free hand rose above his head, trembling. The officers slowed their approach, but did not stop. Strong hands grabbed his arms and pressed him down to his knees. He winced as his leg hit the ground, but he did not resist. A voice behind him barked, "Face down!" Stone obeyed, forehead against pavement. He could taste dust and blood. His chest heaved as he tried to calm his racing heart. He heard the clicking of handcuffs and then felt cold metal close around his wrists. They were tight, but not enough to draw blood. He swallowed hard, trying not to cry out. Stone lay still as two officers guided him into a standing position. They patted him down, found nothing else, and then one of them flicked a flashlight at his leg wound. "You're bleeding pretty bad," the officer said. Stone said nothing. He only nodded, head hanging low. He had wanted to hold on to one last chance. Now he had nothing. As the officers led him away, Stone glanced back at the fence. The bag of money was just a dark shape on the other side, half hidden by shadows. He thought of all he had risked, of the plan that had fallen apart in an instant. He felt a sharp sting of regret, but it was too late. The only thing he could do now was accept the handcuffs and the sirens, and wait for what would come next. Obiora wiped sweat from his brow as he pushed his tricycle to the edge of the dusty lot. The sun had dipped low behind the red-tiled roofs, and the air felt cooler against his tired face. He had just finished a long shift, ferrying passengers from one side of town to the other. Every naira counted, and he still owed nearly half the cost of the tricycle. He rubbed his leg where a small cut throbbed, a reminder that his work was never entirely safe. He steered the tricycle into a patch of tall grass and swung his leg over the seat. He needed a moment alone, away from the noise of the market and the chatter of customers. He grabbed his small bag of tools and walked a few paces into the bushes. The branches rustled under his weight, and he felt a certain relief in being hidden by the leaves. He breathed in the faint scent of earth and grass, enjoying the brief quiet. As he squatted down, his mind drifted back to his debt. He had borrowed money at high interest to buy the tricycle. Each week, he scraped together what he could to make the payment. His mother relied on him now, and he could not let her down. He closed his eyes, imagining the moment when he would finally make the last payment and own the vehicle outright. The thought gave him a spark of hope. Then, suddenly, he heard a thud behind him. It sounded heavy, like a sack dropping from a height. His body stiffened. He stood up quickly, hands moving to steady him in the soft dirt. His eyes darted around the dimming light. Nothing in these bushes moved, except for a small mound of dark fabric at his feet. He stepped closer, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The bag was large and black, with a thick zipper running across the top. Its weight pressed into the soft earth, making a small dent. Obiora's breath hitched. Who would leave a bag here? Why would anyone drop it in a place like this? He glanced back toward the street. Faint blue lights flashed, and he heard distant shouts. The police must be nearby, dealing with someone else. Sweat dripped down his neck as he circled the bag slowly, worry twisting in his stomach. He bent down and tapped the bag with the heel of his shoe. It did not move. He looked around quickly. No one was watching. Slim branches blocked the view from the road, and the police officers seemed occupied with another man in handcuffs. Obiora's pulse thrummed in his ears. He felt a twinge of fear. What if the bag held something dangerous? What if it exploded? His heart pounded harder, and he fought the urge to run. But curiosity stretched out its hand. He knelt beside the bag, breathing in sharply. He placed his trembling fingers on the zipper and slid it open just a crack. A rush of cool air escaped, carrying a faint smell of paper. He pushed the zipper a little more, and his eyes widened as he saw thick bundles of currency stacked neatly inside. The green and brown bands glinted in the fading light. Obiora could not believe what he saw, more money than he had ever dreamed of. His mind spun. He imagined what that money could do. He could pay off the tricycle, buy a small kiosk, send his sister to school. He could finally build a better life for his family. A smile flickered across his face, but almost as quickly, it vanished. The money was not his. It belonged to someone who might kill for it. He thought of the police down the road. If they discovered it here without an owner, they would assume the worst. Obiora closed the zipper and leaned back on his heels. He wiped his palms on his worn trousers, trying to rid them of sweat. He forced down a lump of dread. He needed to decide quickly. The officers would finish with the suspect soon and might come searching the area. If they found the bag and no one claimed it, it would become evidence. Then they would trace it, question him, and he would face trouble he could not handle. He glanced again at the lights dancing through the branches. The man in handcuffs would not get that bag back. Obiora weighed his options. Leave it here and walk away empty-handed, hoping no one else found it first. Or take it now, risk everything, and change his life in a single moment. The temptation squeezed at him like a vice. A gust of wind stirred the bushes around him, and he shivered. The sky was growing dark. Night would bring more people to these streets, the shopkeepers closing their stalls, the students returning home, the hungry stray dogs prowling for scraps. He would not have a better chance than this. His feet felt cold against the dry earth as he rose to his full height. He reached down and gripped the bag strap. It felt heavy in his hand, but not impossible to carry. He swallowed hard, the weight of his choice pressing on his chest. He glanced one more time toward the police, who were guiding the arrested man into a squad car. None of them noticed him. In a single decisive movement, Obiora picked up the bag and slung it over his shoulder. The strap dug into his skin, but he did not care. He backed away through the bushes, pausing only to brush leaves from his path. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Every step felt like crossing a line he could never uncross. He emerged from the bushes and returned to his tricycle. The vehicle stood quietly, its engine cooling in the evening air. He placed the bag carefully on the seat and climbed up. For a moment, he sat there, gripping the handlebars and looking at the dark road ahead. Then, with a deep breath, he kicked the engine to life. The tricycle shuddered forward into the street. Obiora's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, but he saw nothing except empty road. He exhaled, feeling both relief and dread. He was on his way home, but nothing would ever be the same again. Back in his small room, Obiora turned the key and locked the door behind him. The wooden walls seemed to close in around him. He placed the heavy bag of money on a low table made of rough planks. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. For a long moment, he just stared at the stacks of cash. Each bundle was neat and tight. The sight of so much money made his hands shake. Doubt crept in. He remembered the days when he woke before dawn to ride his single tricycle. He thought of the nights he went home empty-handed. He thought of the loan he still owed for that first vehicle. Could he really move forward with stolen money? The room felt colder. A small window let in the pale light of evening. He wrapped his arms around himself and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I have worked too hard to fail now." He thought of his family, his mother, his sister, his young nephew. He thought of the bright hopes he once held. He opened his eyes and reached into the bag. With trembling fingers, he counted out the exact amount he needed. He did not take it all. He left most of it untouched. He only withdrew enough cash to buy 2 more tricycles. The next morning, Obiora walked to the nearby market where tricycles were sold. The air smelled of fresh paint and hot metal. He found the lot where several old vehicles stood in a row. The seller greeted him with a nod. Obiora felt his stomach twist. He handed over the bundles of cash. The seller examined it quickly, then smiled and handed him 2 keys. The deal was done in minutes. Obiora felt a rush of relief. He tucked the 2 keys into his shirt pocket and thanked the seller. He did not rush back home. Instead, he sat on an empty crate and counted his blessings. He thought, "I made the right choice." He walked slowly toward his old tricycle. He placed the 2 new vehicles side by side in front of his room. Their bright colors shone against the dusty ground. Obiora stepped back and admired them. He felt a spark of pride, but he did not let himself celebrate too much. Pride could lead to mistakes. That afternoon, he began looking for drivers. He asked around in his neighborhood and in the nearby markets. He spoke quietly to each man who seemed ready to work. He asked about their character and their daily habits. He wanted people he could trust. Some men said they had experience. Others said they had families to feed. Obiora weighed each answer carefully. In the end, he chose 2 drivers. Both were honest men who had worked for small transport operators before. He gave each man a small portion of cash as a starting deposit. He explained the plan. They would share the daily earnings, give him a fixed payment, and keep the rest. Each week, he would collect his share and then decide whether to reinvest. He laid out the rules clearly, in simple words. Both drivers nodded and shook his hand. That evening, Obiora closed his door again and sat by the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. He wrote down the details in a little notebook. He noted how much he had paid, the drivers' names, and the agreement they had made. He felt a calm settle over him. He had a plan, and he would stick to it. The next morning, the new drivers set out on their tricycles. Obiora watched them go from the door of his room. He saw them greet customers and collect fares. By late afternoon, they returned with small bundles of cash. They placed the money on his table, exactly as they had promised. Obiora counted it carefully. He pulled out his share and then set aside the rest. Every day, he did the same thing. He kept careful records. Whenever he saw extra profit, he thought about his next move. He used every extra naira to buy simple tools, spare parts, or small supplies, nothing flashy. He fixed brakes, replaced tires, and cleaned engines. He made sure each tricycle ran smoothly. The drivers noticed and worked harder. Word of Obiora's neat and reliable vehicles began to spread. In just a few weeks, his fleet grew from one old tricycle to 3 solid machines. Neighborhoods that once hired him alone now called for his small company. Shop owners and students and market traders all knew they could count on Obiora's drivers. His reputation for steady work and fair prices spread quietly. Obiora never bought a fancy car. He did not change his clothes or move to a bigger house. He kept living in the same small room. He rode his first tricycle when he needed to. He blended in with the others on the road. But everyone could see the growing line of tricycles at his door each morning. Some of his old friends whispered in awe. "Did you see? He started with 1 old tricycle, and now he owns 4. He must be making good money." They did not know the full story. They only knew that Obiora had transformed his life. By the end of the month, Obiora had enough profit to buy another vehicle if he wished. But he decided to wait and watch. He had learned the value of patience. He kept the extra money in his bag, safe and ready. He was no longer a struggling rider. He was now a small business owner. At night, he sat under the light bulb and looked at his notebook. He saw the numbers growing, slowly but surely. He closed the notebook and smiled to himself. He had risked everything that day, but he had made the right choice. His modest fleet of tricycles rolled into the future, each one a testament to hard work, trust, and careful planning. Obiora's rise had only just begun. Obiora's small office had bright walls painted in careful strokes of green and white. Sunlight streamed in through a dusty window each morning, lighting up the neat rows of ledgers on his desk. Business was good. Drivers paid on time. Repairs cost less than he expected. Every day, the fleet grew stronger. Yet despite all the success, Obiora carried a heavy weight in his heart. Each time he unzipped the bag and handled the crisp notes, his fingers trembled. He counted the bills slowly, careful not to crease them. As he stacked the bundles, a cold memory returned, Stone's wild, frightened eyes as he dropped the bag and surrendered. Obiora could almost hear the shout of the officer ordering, "Freeze!" It echoed in his mind like a distant thunder. The memory left him hollow, as if he had borrowed another man's fate. At night, the silence of his room offered no comfort. The single bulb overhead cast long, thin shadows on the walls. Obiora lay on his simple mattress, staring at the ceiling. His chest tightened each time the wind rattled the windowpane. In the dark, he imagined Stone's face twisting with rage. What if the man came after him? What if the police traced the money back to his door? Those thoughts made sleep impossible. He tried counting sheep. He tried repeating prayers he had learned as a child. Nothing worked. His mind leapt from one fear to another. He pictured the red badge of the police car, the cold steel of handcuffs. He pictured Stone's bowed head and shuddering breath as he surrendered. Guilt fanned out in his chest and settled there like a lead weight. Morning brought no relief. Obiora rose before dawn, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, and drank a cup of black tea. He forced his eyes open and told himself, "This is my life now. Hard work will wash it away." He walked past his tricycles, breathing in the faint smell of fuel and rubber. The drivers greeted him with polite nods and quick smiles. For a moment, he let himself believe he was just an honest businessman. All day long, he buried the guilt in tasks. He inspected engines, ordered spare parts, counted fares. His hands moved swiftly. He jotted numbers in his notebook, balanced each column twice. He offered kind words to his drivers and customers. He paid small bonuses for good work. He convinced himself that honesty in his business would atone for his secret. Still, each time he saw a new tricycle roll away, a pang of doubt prickled at his mind. Late afternoon brought the worst moments. The sun threw long beams across the dusty yard, and Obiora felt like stone statues watched him. He heard the distant hum of traffic and imagined a police siren cutting through the calm. His heart pounded until he gripped the edge of his desk for support. He closed his eyes and forced a deep breath. "Focus on the work," he murmured. "Focus on the work." As evening fell, Obiora returned home to the same small room. He arranged his ledgers, closed the heavy bag in a hidden corner, and turned off the lights. The air felt cooler but no less heavy. He lay down and waited. Sometimes the guilt would melt into exhaustion, and he would sleep for a few hours. But more often, he lay motionless, trapped between hope and fear. He wondered if a lifetime of honest business could ever erase what he had done. And so the nights continued, each one a silent battle. Obiora learned to live with two faces, the hard-working entrepreneur by day and the restless soul by night. He promised himself that every new tricycle, every coin earned fairly, would be another step toward forgiveness. Yet deep down, he knew that some shadows never fully disappear. Obiora settled into the wide, cushioned chair in his elegant living room. The walls were painted a warm cream, and the soft glow of the table lamp cast gentle shadows over the polished wooden floor. He held a small goblet of palm wine in his hand. The sweet, smoky flavor warmed his throat as he took a slow sip. Outside, the evening breeze rustled the curtains, and the distant hum of traffic reminded him that the city never truly slept. Everything felt calm and ordered, just as he had built his life to be. On the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall, a familiar news program suddenly cut away from its scheduled story. The anchor's face filled the screen, eyes serious. "We interrupt this program for breaking news," she announced, voice steady but urgent. Obiora set his goblet on the low table and leaned forward. His heart picked up pace even before he heard the words he dreaded. He tried to steady his breathing, but each beat pounded in his ears. The anchor continued. After serving 10 years in Queer State Prison, one of the city's most notorious robbers has been released early on good behavior. His name is Samuel Stone Ease. Stone was convicted in 2015 for the daring bank robbery that ended in a public chase. He escaped with a large sum of cash, until the money suddenly vanished. Obiora's fingers curled around the arm of his chair. He felt a cold, not form in his stomach. The broadcast switched to a live feed outside the prison gates. A thin man in a gray shirt stood in front of a small crowd of reporters and cameras. His face was lean, with weary eyes and a faint scar across his cheek. This was Stone. He raised one hand to shield the setting sun and spoke into the microphone, voice rough from years behind bars. "I'm free today," he said, tone flat but steely. "But my mind is not at peace. That money was mine. Someone took it from me. I will find whoever did that, and I will make them answer." Obiora's breath caught. He closed his eyes, remembering the day Stone had dropped the bag at the fence. He could still see the fear in Stone's eyes, the way he had surrendered so easily. Now that same man stood before television cameras, promising justice, or perhaps revenge. Obiora's hands trembled, and the goblet rattled against the table. He kept his face calm, but his mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. Had Stone really meant to hunt him down? The anchor's voice returned. "Stone's lawyers say he is exercising his right to private action and warns the public not to underestimate him. The police advise anyone with information on the missing funds to come forward. We will continue to follow this developing story." Images flashed of newspaper headlines and archival footage of the chase. Stone bleeding from his leg, surrounded by officers in blue uniforms, his gun clattering on the pavement. Obiora pressed his lips together to keep from crying out. He reached for the remote and muted the television. Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady ticking of a clock on the mantel. Obiora stared at the blank screen, mind spinning. He pictured Stone's scarred face again, heard the promise in his gravelly voice. What would Stone do next? Would he come quietly to question neighbors? Or would he strike without warning? Obiora swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every year he had tried to put behind him. Night fell quickly, and Obiora rose to draw the curtains. The streetlights shone outside, casting long beams across the room. He poured himself another measure of palm wine and carried it to the window. He stood there, glass trembling in his hand, and watched the empty street below. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car alarm sounded like a warning. He wondered whether his secret had finally caught up to him. In that silent moment, Obiora asked himself the hardest question he had ever faced. Could he protect the fortune he had built on stolen cash? He knew the answer lay somewhere in the dark, and he feared that once Stone began his search, nothing would ever be the same again. Obiora pressed his finger against the power button, and the television screen went black. The room felt suddenly colder without the glow of the news program. He lay back on the sofa and stared up at the smooth white ceiling. For a long time, he did not move, as if he could freeze the moment and hold on to it forever. He thought about everything he had built, the tricycles, the drivers, the small hotels, even the 2 buses that bore his name painted in bright letters. He had lifted his mother out of her small wooden house and given her a brick home with a tin roof. He had sent his little sister to university and paid for her books and fees in full. His nephew wore neat school uniforms and never asked for extra help with lunch money. His family's lives had changed in every way. Neighbors no longer saw him as the struggling young driver who borrowed money every week. They saw him as a pillar of the community, a man who had made good. They greeted him with respect and called him Sir Obiora when they spoke of him. And yet, in that silent room, all of it felt as fragile as glass. He traced a crack in the plaster overhead with his eyes and imagined it spreading wider until it let the sky pour in. What if the police reopened the case? What if Stone's promise rattled the city's peace and sent officers banging at his door? He pictured uniforms stroking his tricycle's paint, tracing every serial number, counting every naira he had earned. He felt his chest tighten at the thought of facing questions he could not answer. Even worse was the thought of Stone's revenge. What if Stone did not wait for the law? What if he tracked Obiora down himself? Stone's voice on the television had sounded so calm, so sure. He had said he would find whoever took the money, and make them answer for it. Obiora imagined footsteps on his porch at midnight. He imagined a dark figure leaning against the doorframe, scarred face in half-shadow, waiting for him to open the door. Fear curled around him like a snake, squeezing his breath away. Obiora rolled his head to the side and pressed his palm to his forehead. He tasted the bitter sting of regret, as if he had swallowed a teaspoon of ash. He remembered standing in those bushes, heart pounding, holding the bag of money. He remembered the flicker of doubt in his mind, the voice that told him this was wrong, and how he had crushed it with the promise of a better life. The memory felt both distant and raw, like a fresh wound under scar tissue. He sat up and crossed his legs on the sofa. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe slowly in and out. He pictured the days that followed, the first tricycle purchase, the drivers he hired, the profits he watched grow. He imagined each naira as a small stone, building a strong foundation under his feet. He tried to believe that hard work could hide a stolen start. He tried to believe that honest effort would wash away the stain of that first choice. But the stain remained. It lay heavy in his mind, like a shadow that refused to leave. No matter how many honest naira he earned, the original bundles of stolen cash sat locked away in his secret corner. Every night, they whispered his crime back to him. You took what did not belong to you. You risked another man's freedom for your own gain. Those words haunted him more than any threat from Stone or the police. Obiora opened his eyes and shivered. He slid off the sofa and stood on the soft rug. He crossed to the window and pulled back the curtain a sliver. The street below was empty, lit by the weak glow of a single street lamp. A stray cat padded across the cracked pavement. No one watched him. No one would know if he walked away now, if he left all this behind. A sudden urge gripped him, to walk out, to give back the bag, to face justice and end this endless fear. He let the curtain fall and turned away. His life was here. His family, his business, his reputation, all of it had grown from that first chance. Even if it began in wrong, it had become something good. He did not want to lose everything he had spent years building. He wanted to protect his mother's home, his sister's education, the jobs of his drivers. He wanted to keep the respect he had earned, even if its roots lay in a dark moment. Obiora sank back onto the sofa and folded his hands over his chest. He closed his eyes again and asked himself the hardest question he had ever faced. Did I make the right choice that day in the bushes? He held his breath, waiting for an answer he feared might never come. The silence of the room pressed in on him, and all he could feel was the steady beat of his heart, equal parts pride, fear, and doubt. Please tell me your thoughts on this.